It was already mentioned that the civil society organizations play a big role, and their input should be taken into account, and support for them should be granted. Thanks. That's why we have invited a representative of one NGO. This is the Macedonian Center for European Training from Skopje. This is Mrs. Lidija Dimova, who is Executive Director. Please, Mrs. Dimova, you have 10 minutes for your presentation. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reginin. First, allow me to extend my gratitude for being invited on such an important meeting here in the European Parliament. And before I actually go and talk about the experience of Macedonia, I would like to say just a word or two about our organization. The Macedonian Center for European Training is actually an organization, it's a think tank. Although the name says training, we are a think tank, and we try to facilitate the accession process of the Republic of Macedonia within the EU by means of professional training, consultancy, regional cooperation, policy development, and of course advocacy. Probably one of our most important projects is the Accession Watch. This is a partnership project that we're implementing in cooperation with the Foundation Open Society of Macedonia. And we are a watchdog organization. We come up with quarterly reports, and our last report was exactly on the findings of IPA, how Macedonia is actually spending or using or benefiting or not benefiting from the money coming from the European Union. Also, there is one study that I can recommend to you if you're interested, because we just recently closed. It's called How Does Macedonia Benefit from the Community Programs, whether it does the trick, whether the community programs are actually Europeanizing the society or not. These are available on our websites. Now, to go to IPA as one of the instruments that is available for the country, I was thinking what to say. I realized that within the agenda you are waiting to hear some of the problems, because from these problems there will be the lessons learned that the Parliament and the Commission can learn. So if you were looking forward for problems, boy, do I have problems for you. I've got so many problems, and unfortunately, unlike Croatia, Macedonian story is not a successful one. Now, how do I go about speaking about the problems? Well, I try to group them in 4 major clusters, if you like. And I group them more in terms of where can you see them going. The first one is, I call the group of lack of institutional capacity. And I'll give you just the figures so that you understand what I'm talking about. At this particular point of time, within Component 1, for example, Macedonia, almost half of national IPA 2007 was actually contracted at the end of 2010, which means that at this specific point of time, we still have projects from IPA 2007. Half of national IPA 2008 was contracted at the end of 2011, which means they'll be implemented in 2012 and in 2013. And we're talking about IPA 2008. Then only 1.8% of national IPA 2009 is absorbed so far, and only 1.5% of national IPA 2010 is absorbed so far. So I don't think I need to come with a conclusion. You understand what I'm trying to say. Number 2, lack of administrative capacity. There are 4 major points that I want to make about this. First is programming versus projects. Very often you hear the government representatives saying that the reason why we can't spend the money from IPA is because they don't get reliable projects from the stakeholders. Now, this tells you that the government doesn't understand that the stakeholders don't come up with the projects just like that. They have to be put within a programming framework. There has to be something strategic about it, and it speaks for itself. Then if you look inside the nitty-gritty bits, you see that in Macedonia, for example, you've got too much use of the project preparation facility. And if the average in the region would be 3% of the budget used for project preparation facility, in Macedonia it's something like 5 to 15%. And that's not too bad, but if you look what this is used for, and if you come to the conclusion that most of it is used for drafting terms of references, then it is a really sad story if you don't have civil servants knowledgeable enough to draft terms of references. then if you analyze the whole IPA in the country, then you will see that some sectors don't have €1 programmed. And this is, for example, the Chapter 19, employment. Now, of course, you would say, if you're the government or the commission, sorry, you would say, but you've got the whole fourth component. You know, this is what the component number 4 stands for employment. But I put forward the question, is this enough? I mean, is this enough to leave the whole employment area not tackled? There is no need of any kind of building of institutions, especially in a country where the level of unemployment is so high. Then we have a very high level of turnover, of staff turnover in key institutions. I think the problem with this is the politicization of the public administration, because in the last several years, the only way you can get into public administration is if you belong to one of the political parties of the ruling government. And then once you get into public administration, you benefit from European Union funds and trainings, and then you begin to understand certain things. And then all of a sudden, the party realizes that you've got some capacity, and they take you away from the institution where you were, and they put you in a different institution where the political party needs you best. For example, a director of some public enterprise, and so on. So the institutions are very much weakened without consideration of how much this is, what kind of detriment this is doing to the process. The number 3 is a set of problems I call no instrument mix. What am I trying to say? First of all, I think that there is a lack of strategic input by the government. The government doesn't want to understand that you can use this component, and this is a public debate actually. The government does come out and say that component 1 is only for central administration, for central government administration, which is not entirely true. So what I'm trying to say is that if they can see that there are schools, that there are unions, that are Roma organizations, that the municipalities, farmers and SMEs that will benefit from the 3rd and 4th and the 5th component, then they should use the 1st component to build up the capacity for these groups to be able to benefit from the 4th and the 3rd and the other components. But this is not done. Then IPA is almost entirely used as technical assistance in Macedonia, almost entirely. This means that you're using IPA as cards, nothing different. There's nothing different between, if you compare the rules, it's completely the same thing as cards. The grant schemes are used only twice. The first one is from IPA 2008, where it was the civil society grant scheme within the 1st component, and I have to say it's one of the most successful projects. And then there's the other grant scheme, which is managed by the government, the 1st grant scheme managed by the government under the decentralized model, and it's from the 4th component. Now, this is a story for itself, I think. The call for proposals came out in June 2010, and it was for integration ethnic women in the labor market. The budget available was €1.6 million. Up to today, the contracts still have not been signed. So it's almost 2 years to contract 1.6 million. My question is, what's going to happen with all the rest of the money if the government takes 2 years to do such a small amount of money? Then number 3 is improper use of twinning. I'm sad to say that I have the feeling that to avoid decommitment, sometimes the Commission is saving the government by programming projects that are not plausible. And I'll give you an example so that we don't speak on the top of my head. The 4th component, there is a twinning project with the Center for Adult Education. The twinning is worth 1.7 million. Do you know how large the annual budget of this institution is? It's only 220,000 euros. So in effect, what you're doing, you're giving 8 times more money to an institution for a twinning. I mean, it spelled disaster just by looking at it. And you can't expect any results from here. Then budget support. I'm not going to talk about the budget support because I think the person from the gentleman from the Court of Auditors already said something about the budget support. And I hope, I know that the government now is trying to get some budget support, and I hope they don't get it because we've got local elections coming next year. And yes, the government has been known to misuse some of the money, not even the European money. From the agency, for example, but I'm not going to go into that. Then the other thing that I would like to mention, the fourth group of problems occurs on the lack of political will. And I'm just going to mention some of the things that are going on that don't make any sense. For example, except for cross-border cooperation, component number 2, all the rest of the operational programs in Macedonia have not been even translated in Macedonian, not to mention Albanian. So you have all these, what makes it even more interesting is the fact that loads of money the government spends for translation of books. But these documents, they don't think they're worth translating. I don't know, but they're not translated. Then something that was mentioned here was about donor coordination. I think this is also a very interesting case. Macedonia is giving $13.2 million to UNDP for implementing active employment measures. Now, how does this fit in with the fourth component? If you know that the employment agency is the backbone of the fourth component, then why are you giving the money to UNDP to implement something that the employment agency needs to do? So I'm just putting the questions forward. Then Macedonia doesn't have a national development plan. I know that the MIPD 2012-2013 for Macedonia says that there is a national development plan. I know that the revision of the operational program for the fourth component of human resource development says that there is a national development plan, but no, there isn't a national development plan. There hasn't been a national development plan for such a long time. There's a story about it. I'm not going to go into the story, but this really tells you how difficult it must be for the civil servants to start programming without a national development plan. And at the end, I just want to say one thing about the General IPA Auditor. Now, this is something that really is going to sounds very strange. First of all, the person that is the General IPA Auditor in the country is a person that is in love with the Prime Minister. So if you visit his Facebook profile, you will see there aren't even pictures of himself. It's all the Prime Minister. He is not an economist. He's not an auditor. He's a legal expert. He was the previous director of the public enterprise for management of residential and business property, and he was the guy who was actually buying the government bonds for the Prime Minister. Now, this is our General IPA Auditor. If you read the progress report, the Commission is saying that there are problems here, but they're saying it very politically correct to put things into perspective. Now, just one sentence. I know you're thinking and you're wondering, why do I need to say all this to you? And you can't help a democratically elected government. I understand that, but this is the European Parliament, and you are representing the people of the European Union, not the governments. And I need to say to you, to stress the importance of how difficult it is for the citizens of Macedonia. We've been stuck in the hallway since 2005, no negotiations whatsoever. We've got a problem with Greece, which doesn't make any sense. We've got a very high level of unemployment. We have a poverty line which is really high. And we have a government who doesn't really understand democracy. And still, the people are in favor of European integration. I think that speaks for itself. Macedonians are Europeans. Thank you.
I think we should more often invite representatives of the civil society. I'm sure that the presentation of Madame Dimova was very, very important for the members of European Parliament as well, because very often we, discuss the big strategies and the nice picture and everything, but there are some realities on the ground that we should also take into account. That's why I really thank you for this presentation. Now we